Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and night for some of you as well. Welcome to our annual summit. This is the second time we're doing this, and it's last year we had an amazing an event, a lot of great feedback on our speakers and the activities that we had for everyone. So we're looking forward to another fun-filled half-day with all of you. I'm Vanitha Lucas, the executive director, and you can also see my co-executive director, Frederick, as well as some other team members have joined. And we have members from around the world who have joined as well. So welcome and thank you. I know we're almost at the end of the year. Everyone's probably wrapping up for the holidays. So hope you can enjoy the day today and soak in all the great speakers that we have. We are recording this summit, which is great because I know many people can't join, and we'll be using these clips in future events and blog posts. It's quite a lengthy agenda, so if you're interested in seeing the entire agenda, you can just go to our website and take a look, or I'm assuming this QR code here takes you to the agenda as well. Great. So before we get started, I wanted to just give everyone an overview of Viz for Social Good. We are a very unique organization in the sense that what we do is really help many people. We help the community, and we have a group of volunteers, and their role here is really to help mission-driven organizations create social change through data, storytelling, data analysis. And our model is very unique, and I don't think you'll find anyone like Viz for Social Good around. We're completely run by volunteers, and we work not only to promote social causes, but we promote our team of volunteers. I can't tell you how many volunteers have come back and said, what an amazing experience it's been working with Viz for Social Good. You've helped me with my career. I've been able to give back. And we have such a wide range of volunteers, those that are, just starting out their careers. We have students. We also have people that are, have reasonably spent a lot of time in the data space and, just want to give back. So it's really amazing to see this breadth of volunteers, but also how not only are they here to help the charities, but they're helping each other. And so we see ourselves as this conduit between, data enthusiasts and mission-driven organizations. And our community is just getting like more and more visibility around the world. And but just the fact that we've been able to deliver social impact to each of the projects that we do. Our charities have come back and said, everything you have done for us has just been great. It has elevated us to really understand the power of data. So again, just it's been an amazing experience personally for me, working with Viz for Social Good. And our model again is we support nonprofits around the world. You may recognize some of these logos, and the others you probably don't. But again, and that's our values. We work with really small charities who have very, very powerful missions. In many cases, they sometimes have not even really heard or understood what data visualization is or what storytelling and the power of it is. And so we've actually helped them elevate their journey, their data journey, and really showed them their own data and their business come to life. And then in some cases, we have worked with, again, larger organizations who have absolutely welcomed our volunteers and their skills. Again, some of the larger organizations, tend to have a smaller team or a platform, but not in all cases are they really, really good at storytelling. And so they value the diverse, visuals and stories that come from our volunteers. And we're always on the lookout for nonprofits to work with. So if anyone does have any referrals, that would be great. Again, we're all volunteer based, and so that's a unique part of our model. And we're global as well. What's amazing is you see this place called Furniture Bank. They help families with furniture poverty who are just getting into new homes. They're based in Toronto, Canada. However, our volunteers are more than happy to work on a mission, that's somewhere on the other side of the world, because inevitably, those same social causes are evident in their area. So that's amazing as well. We always hear our charity members talk about, oh, look, this data visual came from somebody in Japan. I can't believe that, they've never actually worked with volunteers outside of their own geographical realm. So that's great as well. So the fact that we're all able to lend our data skills and our talent to any organization around the world, again, is just awesome. Okay, and just to talk a little bit about 2004. And as I mentioned, we are always on the lookout for projects. Typically every year we may work with, anywhere from 3 to 5 charities. And even before we decide who we're working with, we have some conversations with them because we need to understand, what is the state of their data and what they're looking to do. And, those conversations, even just having those initial ones, sometimes they don't work out. That just opens up our eyes to understand, wow, there are so many organizations around the world just doing just some amazing things and helping the community. One group we worked with earlier is Noise Solution, and their model is about music, and they transform youth lives through music, and believe that music is a great therapy to help individuals, overcome challenges and thrive. So first time, and again, there's always first time that we've been working on a certain type of, causes. Same thing with the Global Deaf Research Institute. They're trying to advance the understanding through deaf-led research. And, again, for me, that was eye-opening because you don't realize what some of the challenges deaf people face. And our most recent project, the Association for the Prevention of Torture. Again, for many of us, who live in sort of modern country, you don't necessarily hear about torture. You may see it on movies and things, but it's happening around the world. And so this organization is really championing human rights and trying to prevent torture worldwide. And in this project, it was about visualizing something that isn't happening, and that was interesting because they wanted to showcase that something is not happening around the world, and eventually you don't want any of it to happen. So you're visualizing and working on something that you can't see. So again, these are some three really powerful projects our volunteers did this year. And I'll tell you, and I probably say this on every project call, every time our volunteers just go above and beyond. Like the breadth of effort they put into it, the type of visuals and stories. And, sometimes we'll have a volunteer who's never participated in a project. Their visual gets chosen by the charity. And it's just simply it's amazing. I could spend all my time just going through the different submissions from the volunteers. And even while they're working on projects, we have a Slack channel that's set up, and just watching collaboration between the volunteers who are out there to help not only, work on the project, but they're helping each other, which is again fantastic. Like I'll see folks that putting their visual and many people join the project, yet they feel they have imposter syndrome, thinking, I'm not good enough and my visual, I don't know if I should. But when they're in this community, they're getting feedback from others and really the support they need. And through that, they're also educating themselves. So this is where I think, the power of the community is amazing, because not only is everybody collaboratively working on a project for a charity, they're also helping each other and the network. I think in our volunteer database, we probably have over, 1,000 folks. And, we know we can't expect everybody to participate for every project. So this year through the projects that we ran, there was about 127 volunteers coming from 74 countries. I was blown away when I saw this number. I thought, wow, that's just amazing. Usually every project, we have about 30, 40 submissions. And, as I mentioned earlier, just a diverse expertise. We have students who have just picked up a tool, out of school. They're just learning Tableau or, some data science tools like, Python and so forth. And we also have folks, again, that are just in the profession, but are having fun and wanting to give back. We find a lot of data visualization professionals in their day jobs. They're very constrained in what they can do in terms of their job if they're, working on specific data visuals or they have to follow a certain, format. And not all sort of corporate organizations are open to these fancy visuals because it's not necessarily practical for a day-to-day, operational dashboards. So they really come here and have experiment and learn. And what we've also seen over the last few years, just the growth in the tools and techniques used. It started off where, we still have a big Tableau base, but more and more in each project, we see there's just so many other tools used, R and Python and Power BI and, Adobe. In fact, the last project we had, I think the volunteers chosen were all using tools that weren't necessarily, Tableau. So again, because we're tool agnostic, we promote, hey, come in and use any tool. I think there was one project somebody actually sort of hand drew some bar charts as part of this infographic, which was again great. So and we know now with the advent and the explosion of more and more tools that I think having the volunteers bring their expertise in other tools is great as well. Like we all learn when we see how different tools are applied, and then even different techniques. We had one volunteer for noise solution do some kind of a music tunes associated with the visuals. So that was fantastic as well. So just the quality of work our volunteers are producing it's just amazing. And our team, our volunteers, we do have a global presence in that, we are asked to present at conferences, or we apply to present conferences, we're accepted. There are numerous, I don't know how many Tableau user groups there are now around the world, but there's always somebody from Biz for Social Good, presenting at some of these, spreading the word. We have our volunteers who can showcase their work. Again, many professionals aren't necessarily allowed to share the work that they do in their day jobs. And so they take pride in being able to share their skills on the work that they do at Viz for Social Good. We're at the Outlier Conference, Data to Speak. That's an annual conference, and we were invited to judge. So again, I think our involvement throughout the world and our visibility continues to grow. And again, that's thanks to all our volunteers and the team who are just, putting our name out there. Okay. Why is not my slide moving now? And also, we spend a lot of time on educational activities. So earlier this year, our one of our board directors, Ada, who could not be here, did a Future Fridays event every Friday the month of July, partnered through a partnership with Data Visualization Society and Infograde. And really, the topic is about fast fashion, which I think we all know very well, especially if you have teenagers are constantly buying clothes. And so it was very well attended because it was a series, and she dedicated every Friday preparing for these and running a 1-hour session. Again, all volunteering. I had the opportunity last month to go to the World Data Forum, and there's an agenda item on this later. Part of that was delivering a boot camp using generative AI, which is again just blowing up in terms of how it can help. So again, we're out there not only helping missions, charities meet their missions, but we're also educating audiences around the world. And this year we also won a Global Business Award. So Viz for Social Good got an award for the most socially conscious data visualization enterprise 2024. I think they're based in Australia. So it's nice to be again recognized. When you're competing for awards, sometimes you see these corporate names and who have spent a lot of budget on their data resources and tools. So sometimes just getting something and competing with them and winning is actually really rewarding. And, you know, thank you from all of us. This is one of my favorite quotes around volunteers, right? Volunteers don't necessarily have the time, they have the heart. And our deepest gratitude to all our volunteers, the team who always show up day in and day out and when there's a project. And, you know, thank you to all our partners and as well as, you know, our charities who are generous in opening up their data and spending time with our volunteers to run these projects. So thank you, everybody. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Vanitha. Hello, hi everyone. My name is Ho. I am based in Singapore. I have been with VIS for Social Good for about 4 years. I started as a volunteer, then became the APAC lead, and now the ambassador of VIS for Social Good. So VIS for Social Good mission is very close to my heart. It's about doing good with data. And one of the things I am proud of while working with VIS for Social Good is to have my VIS for Social Good volunteers contribution selected by Tableau and printed into posters at a Tableau conference a few years back. Um, and with that, I think we can start the keynote section. And we have the honor to have Jennifer Oldfield with us today. A short intro about Jennifer. She is the Senior Director of External Relations, Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. Jennifer previously worked for the United Nations in UNDP's Human Development Report Office and for the United Nations Global Pulse Initiative. In 2014, she helped the UN Secretary General's Independent Expert Advisory Group on a data revolution for sustainable development, deliver a world that counts. Jennifer spent 10 years working for the UK government as a speech writer, digital engagement specialist, and in the UK Prime Minister's office as Prime Minister Cameron's website editorial and social media lead. She is based in New York City. Jennifer, over to you.
Thanks, Iho, and huge thanks to Vanitha and Frederick as well. I'm such a big believer in VIS for Social Good. As the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, we've also been a recipient of the volunteers' help, as well as you all being part of our wider network. And as Vanitha was saying before, it was an amazing experience. I think our volunteer was based in South Asia, and I'm in New York. So basically, we would hand over a project we were really grappling with that was so difficult. And then, you know, we'd wake up in the morning to like magical dashboards and things that we couldn't do if we'd put 100 hours of our own time. So it was a really humbling and amazing experience. Let me go to my presentation. Thanks. Okay. So, oh, looking at the wrong screen here. Give me a minute. Okay, great. Can people see the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, super. Looking at the description I gave originally for this presentation, I fear I've gone slightly off-piste. So I guess I'll just say that, you know, we have this phrase in the UK that you don't want to teach your grandmother to suck eggs. You guys are so good at data storytelling and visualization that what I'm going to do is give a bit more of a kind of 1,000-mile perspective on my experience and our experience of what we see as the sort of trends and the direction of travel in the data for social good arena. So thanks for the introduction about me. You can probably hear I'm from the UK originally, and I've been in New York now for about 12 years. Our initiative, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, is hosted at the UN Foundation, and the UN Foundation interfaces between the UN and the rest of the world. So the majority of our projects are connected to the mission of the UN in some way, shape, or form, and all of the other initiatives hosted at the UN Foundation are the same, and some of them dive deep into things like youth engagement, girls, climate change, energy, etc. So our area of focus is data for development and increasingly AI and, digital economies and the whole kind of family of different things. So we're a network. We have 700 partners. It's always fluctuating, but that's what it is, roughly. And we have a lot of government partnerships. We work with a much bigger number of governments, but in terms of kind of specific projects and training that we're doing, it's around 40 governments at the moment. So if you attend any UN event or you come to UN General Assembly, you'll hear, a fair degree of gloominess, basically, which is that we have the Sustainable Development Goals. They are, when people say social good, that's what we mean by social good, which is like where we're trying to get to specifically. And unfortunately, the world is off track with that. And, we all know why. There's so many challenges in the world. Things can get worse as well as better. I remember when I was young, I thought things got continuously better in every country over time. And then, today we're moving into an area where there's sort of perma crises, and there used to be two distinct communities, the humanitarian one and the sustainable development one. But increasingly they're one and the same because we're fighting common challenges all the time. So just talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, here's just a reminder of what they are, so it's poverty, it's hunger eradication, it's health, it's kids in school, gender equality, which is, still a big issue in many countries, and we see kind of quite a bit of backsliding there, water and sanitation. And although we're not allowed to play favorites, I think you'll find that many countries are very focused on climate change at the moment, as well as equalities in all of their different fields. And the intersection between climate and health is a big trend in the development field. We're working on a project at the moment that is about using satellite data to see cholera surges in the water, basically from space, which is really crazy, and I would never have anticipated that. But basically, this is something that you see connected to climate change, sort of changes in the heat of the water, spreading diseases, hitting communities, and so there needs to be those early warning systems. And so when in 2015, when these goals were brought in, I think it was kind of more considered that these were individual little sub-communities, but now we're looking at the interconnectedness between every single one of these, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. So our area is very cross-cutting. Just to say a little bit about, so we have a network, but my secretariat is 30 people. We're based in 10 different countries currently. We're location agnostic, so we just hire whoever's best for the team, wherever they are. But in terms of, data for the SDGs, we're still lacking quite a lot of data. And I think this is an experience you'll find if you volunteer and help any UN agency, you'll often find that they have quite big holes in the data. And so it can be quite frustrating to kind of get a project off the ground when, for example, the latest data is from 2021 or, further back. And the more complex the challenges are for a country, then the more that it's difficult for them to have the capacities that they need and to fill in those data gaps. For example, there hasn't been a census in Nigeria for, probably 15, 20 years. And so when a country doesn't even know who's in the country, then it's really difficult to get the basic data. And then that has an impact on how it's shared, how it's visualized, etc. I want to hear from you guys now. So since we're talking about trends that are affecting social good and the Sustainable Development Goals, what are some positive or negative trends that you're seeing around the world that you think are affecting the SDGs? And you can just pop it in the chat for now, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussions at the end. Thank you. And actually, I can't see the comments. So if Vanitha, if you want to jump in with any interesting comments, please go ahead. Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you. Give people a minute. maybe I'll move on and we'll come back to it a little bit later. Oh, I see.
It's a quiet crowd. I was
Yeah,
getting
that's
them going.
okay. I mean, and, you know, people are just
Yeah.
waking up, especially if you're on my time zone. So maybe
Okay.
let me just say that kind of when you go to UN General Assembly, I think AI, generative AI, and kind of trends around how technology and data is really shaping the world is really top of mind for a lot of people. And for me and for our community, this is a bit of a double-edged sword. You know, you have your sort of data evangelists who are super excited about everything that's possible, but maybe they underestimate the challenges. And then you have your kind of data alarmists and AI alarmists who will tell you that the world is going to hell in a handcart. And the challenge for us is to kind of thread the needle and say, yes, there are significant challenges that we need to navigate. We can navigate them together. But there are opportunities for every single country. There's nobody who can't benefit from the technological changes that are coming about. And it's just about kind of sort of finding that pragmatic third way, which as a communicator can sometimes be challenging because journalists want to write either the kind of this will fix all problems sort of story or the kind of things are going to be terrible story. They don't normally want to tell the more balanced story. So it's a little bit challenging.
So Jenny, just some of the comments
Yes,
if you want to
please.
hear.
Yes, I do.
So we have the poverty and health, consensus is data viz design circles is that climate change work will be a major focus for data viz. Climate crisis, we also have politics to more conservative leadership groups not as supportive for climate or social investment. Being able to quickly spread information, positive and quickly spread misinformation. Climate change and the finances available for that. Temperature going up with stronger storms, political tensions and wars. Political world scenario. Not enough news of the good stories.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the more interesting things for me is around the world, there's been many, many elections today. This year has been a kind of super year for elections. Something like a quarter of all the countries in Africa have had general elections. And this has been a terrible year for incumbent governments. So basically, almost every government that is an incumbent one is getting kicked out. And I think that shows you that this goes beyond the politics of individual countries. People all over the world are, you know, they're scared, they're unhappy, there's high inflation, you know, there aren't so many solutions to climate change. And so I think it's a matter of saying the people have to come together and find the solutions and put pressure on the politicians. And we'll talk about this more later, but to me, data visualization and storytelling is a really key part of how civil society and journalists and, you know, people working in communities can put pressure on their politicians to share the data and then tell the story about, you know, what's happening to them and why it matters to make change. So, lest I kind of sound too negative, I just want to share a few kind of positive trends around the Sustainable Development Goals. The under fives mortality rate has continued to increase. There've been some obviously setbacks in the last couple of years, and COVID changed a lot of the SDG progress. But in general, this is an area where, you know, what can be more important than children and babies continuing to live, and these numbers are going in the right direction. And so that's great, and that's really what Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals is all about. Women in national parliaments, you know, we've seen this data is a little old, but we've seen some new presidents and prime ministers who are women and seen some of the impacts that they're making, and the numbers are kind of edging up, not as quickly as we would always like, but you know, there is some progress. And what I like about women in parliament statistics is they're very easy to calculate. You know, it's not a big lift to sort of count them, and so you can see what's happening. And then renewable energy, this is the one, you know, we talked about climate change. This is the one that people will always talk about because I think we've been surprised by the amount of positive uptake there's been, and you can really see that this can continue, and it's sort of shaping economies, shaping markets, etc. And so that gives some people cause for hope, although, you know, obviously the climate change goals are still a big challenge overall. Okay, so I think the conversation in my circles is always, so we know at this point, basically, we've only got a few years until 2030, that we're not going to achieve all the sustainable development goals. So, you know, should we just admit it? Should we admit defeat? Essentially, it's still worth us really pushing on this last mile, because I think today it would be very difficult to agree the sustainable development goals. You know, they represent the world's shared agreement on what the world should look like. And even that is kind of hard to hold together. And so we need to kind of reiterate again and again, multilateral progress is really, really important. Also, you know, we don't want this to be a waste of time. We've poured tremendous resources around the world in trying to achieve that. And you, the volunteers, and all of the organizations in my network are a part of that progress. And then the other thing is, like, what else would we be doing? The things that were represented on the slide that I showed you is basically what most people want in life. You know, you want your family to be well and not sick. You want your kids to go to school. You want people to have good jobs and be able to support themselves. And so, you know, the SDGs really just represent people's basic desires in life. So where do you come in? I think that your volunteering work really fits into some key challenge areas that we need to kind of get back on track with the Sustainable Development Goals. And so, you know, there is a communications challenge about data and about the specific issues around the SDGs. And I think your work with data storytelling is really powerful in making an impact and making a difference. I really love the Institute for the Deaf example because, you know, inclusion is incredibly important. And when you kind of elevate some of those stories and some of those numbers, it reminds people why this area is worthy of investment and why we can't leave people behind and let these things fall by the wayside. Then there are skills challenges. It's an unfortunate reality that most of the global South governments we work with, they don't have the skills that they would like to have. And a lot of the small grassroots organizations, they don't have the skills that they would like to have to tell stories with the data that they're collecting. And so I see a big need, and I think, you know, happy to work with any of you who want to do more work with people in our network to do some matchmaking. But essentially, you bring an incredible skill set that many smaller organizations or global South countries can't afford to just buy in. And, you know, there's a kind of brain drain issue where people are learning these skills at university, but when they graduate, they're going into private sector jobs rather than government jobs or nonprofit jobs. So there's a real gap there that you can assist with. And I love Vanitha's emphasis on training and education. Then there's financing challenges. So like I just mentioned, we don't have large budgets, unfortunately, but often if there's a volunteer situation, it can kind of show the need. So you can say, this is what we did with volunteers. Imagine if we could do that every day, or imagine if we could get a person that could do this. And so often there's a kind of demonstrator effect. And then also, like I said, you help show why an area is important in a more immediate and accessible way. And that can help donors and others want to invest in a specific area. And then finally, there's democracy challenges. You know, like I just mentioned, we're kind of a lot of the barometer of democracy is swinging in the wrong direction. And so transparency, open data, holding politicians to account has never been more important. And then often it's really hard to comprehend trends that are happening with governments or things that are going in the wrong direction. And so data visualization, data storytelling can help tell that story in a way that many, many more people are going to understand than if it was just kind of an Excel spreadsheet. Just want to mention the Global Digital Compact. So this was something that was brought in after a lot of negotiating and wrangling between different countries. in the last UN General Assembly. So, as I mentioned, there's a trend around AI, increasing digital economies, digital public goods, but there's a need to kind of infuse the way we use data and technology in society with the ethics and the ethos of Agenda 2030. So that's really what the Global Digital Compact is about. I encourage you to read it. It's, you know, an interesting document and represents a lot of, you know, a lot of progress, because not everyone wanted to see progress. But essentially now the task is to change this lofty document into something that exists in the real world. So there's a very large kind of gap there between the aspirations of the United Nations and its member states and the reality of what's going on in the world. So I mentioned before kind of interlinkages between these different areas. The UN is particularly focused on these transitions around social protection and jobs, around energy, around education. Food systems is something that's really under threat from climate change, you know, and some simple challenges and changes are kind of threatening the ability of the world to produce the amount of food it needs for its increasing population. Digital transformation is really the area, one of the areas that we're playing in, and obviously there are threats to biodiversity and nature. So these are some of the areas that you might look to help, you know, being part of the answer and being part of helping nonprofits sort of move towards Agenda 2030. These are some kind of hot topics. And then there are some cross-cutting areas as well. I mentioned gender equality. We fall into this fairly boring bucket of means of implementation, but, you know, I say it's boring, but basically these are the things that really make the change at the end of the day. It's financing, it's how things get paid for, it's data, it's what national agendas look like to small little remote communities who might not catch people's attention. It's trade. Obviously, there's some changes going on in the US government that might affect trade and tariffs and stuff. And then I mentioned already public sector capabilities and some skills gaps there. So these are areas that, you know, I think we would love to see more attention being put, because they've been a little bit overlooked in the past. So I'm just going to run through quickly a little bit of our broader work, and then we can have some conversation. So I mentioned inclusive data. Marginalized communities can tremendously benefit from data visualization and data visibility that sort of represents their lived experience. For example, Vanitha was just in Colombia at the World Data Forum. Colombia has a huge number of indigenous communities, and the overlapping complexities that they have. For example, someone who lives in a remote community, they're indigenous, they're a woman, they're also disabled. Those people are really the furthest from, you know, those who are making progress in life, and they're disadvantaged in many ways. And so a lot of what we do is about working with governments and working with grassroots organizations to get better data about these people who are disenfranchised and to see some of the links between them. And so this kind of sounds obvious, but it's easy for these communities to be overlooked. Then accountable data governance, that relates back to the Global Digital Compact, and, you know, the rules that are underpinning the way we introduce these new technologies can make the difference between making the world better or making the world worse. And then timely data, this sounds sort of obvious, but there is still a tremendous gap when it comes to data that you'd need in order to make decisions. And that isn't always like real-time data every second. For example, if you're allocating school seats in a municipality, you need to know how many kids there are going to be in 1 year's time, you know, so that you can plan for it. And so timely data in that context might be annual. But then if you're crossing the road, you know, you want data about kind of whether it's safe or not immediately. And so we talk to different governments and different grassroots organizations about what they need to make a difference on the ground and what would need to change in order to get it. And then often we match make with those who have the data. For example, telecommunications companies are sitting on a wealth of data that shows how people are behaving and how they're acting, how they're displaced, if there's an earthquake, where they've been displaced to. And so we might work to unlock that data and to do it safely while protecting the privacy of the people, but allowing the trends to be shown in a way that can facilitate decision making. But there's a lot of complexity around them. Just quickly on our flagship initiatives, Data for Now is the one that connects to timely data. And like I said, often this is about unlocking data and making sure that it's used in the real world. This can also fit nicely with data visualization and data storytelling. The Inclusive Data Charter relates to what I was mentioning about people who are disenfranchised and, you know, how we can lift them up. I'll share this, you know, I won't read every word on the page, but I'll share the presentation later so you can look in more detail. So we have an inclusive data charter that helps people look at different elements. For example, we have Sight Savers, a charity that helps those who are blind, especially in poorer countries. And so, you know, we might talk to them about what data they have, what data they can access, what data they can need, and then help them come up with a plan to close some of those gaps and to raise awareness about the importance of it. And then, you know, we work with different governments who have different focus areas. For example, I mentioned Colombia, who care about specific groups that have been invisible in the data in the past. And so that's a really nice project, and probably one where a lot of your skills could come in handy and that we could do some matchmaking. The Data Values Project. So when I've been in my role for about 7 or 8 years. When I started, we would primarily talk about data as if it was a technical gap, you know, that everything would be fine if we had all the data we needed and people had the capacities to use them. We know that that's not true now. And in order to make progress, we need to be more normative, more campaigning, kind of fighting for what's right and fighting against people deliberately excluding people from the data, or, you know, God forbid, trying to find data in order to specifically persecute people. This happens. There's a lot of authoritarian countries that are trying to innovate, but they're trying to innovate in order to oppress certain populations rather than help them. So we need to, you know, work with organizations that understand this, work with the UN on common goals and guardrails and holding people to account, and make sure that data and technology is part of the solution, not part of the problem. So that's really what the Data Values Project is about. And we have a number of different youth advocates that are extremely active in their communities on specific areas, and they're very inspiring to talk to. They show you that no matter your age or no matter your circumstance, you can make a huge difference. So just to close, what can you do? You're already here. You guys are fantastic. You're already doing the work. If we could double or triple the number of you, and if we could find them amazing projects, then it would make a huge difference. So talk about your work, talk to your peers, talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends about your volunteering, why you moved to do this, what differences have you seen that have come as a result, what relationships have you made, how has it helped you professionally. We want to encourage more people to be like you. You're the poster children of progress. There's a communications gap, like I mentioned. So describe why data and data visualization helps in really simple terms that your mom could understand, or your auntie or something, you know, because often people will see it as like, that's just for the techies, I don't need to care about it. Whereas we know that's not the case. And then finally, if you have a job already, ask your workplace what they're doing in terms of pro-social initiatives. How are they contributing towards the Sustainable Development Goals, towards really making a difference for people? And if they don't have any program, you can suggest that they do. You can always put them in touch with me, you know, encourage them to join our network, etc. Our network spans all of the different sectors. We're a very broad one. And so there's always room for improvement and room for more replication of the fantastic things you do. I'll close there for questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny. That was just Great, and thank you today for coming today. It's just wonderful to hear you speak and hear about all the initiatives that GPSDD is doing, and thank you for your support to Vis for Social Good. I know I think we both met, just you saw a tweet about us and you got in touch with us, so it's I still tell everyone how a simple tweet has turned so many lives around. So yes, thank you for joining us today.
Most welcome, and we'll share these slides, but my details are on it. So, feel free to reach out to me directly. My team sort of runs the network and looks after communications. And so I'm a good front door to other people that you might want to meet in the data for development world. So thanks for listening.
Okay. Any questions? We have a few minutes.
There was one from Pete. Pete, are you able to come off mic and microphone and ask your question, or you're still in bed? Pete, see me? Are you there? The question was about there was in the chat. Are you there, Pete?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Ask your question. You've got a few minutes.
Oh yeah, no, the question was just about when we were talking about representation and stuff. What about the problem of governments deliberately misrepresenting data, like when you see all these charts where you have a zero access that is down there, and they're telling a different story from what the data is telling you. That was the point, basically.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on this a bit with the data values. So I guess to say we do work with a lot of governments, but, many of them we don't work with because they don't quite meet our standards, or they're they have slightly spurious approaches to things. And so that's why we work with sort of whole of society. And I think it's really important to work with the grassroots organizations and the civil society organizations that hold people to account. And it's important to call people out when they're misrepresenting data or just misrepresenting things in general. If you're not familiar with Access Now, they're a great organization to follow. They do a lot of advocacy around data and misinformation and sort of the less positive things that are done with data, and they have some great conferences and stuff as well. So big shout out to them, because they're doing some great stuff to specifically go after people who are using data in bad ways. Thanks.
Jenny, that was Access Now as an ACCESS?
Yeah, I'll put a link in they have a big conference every year. I'll share it. Thanks.
Actually, I had a question about, so I've heard a lot in the recent past about the term Global South. What is that essentially? Yeah, I mean, it's a really bad term. I think there's no kind of really good and politically correct term to use, but basically what we mean is low and middle income countries, essentially, which tend to be in the global south. So when we say global north, that tends to be your Europes and richer countries that have benefited from colonialism, etc. And often we use global south because of the phrase South-South cooperation. So a lot of what we do is facilitate peer exchange of knowledge between organizations and countries who are in the global south. So just to give you an example, Uruguay are a small country. That's where we held our data festival. They sort of operate like a lab. They're very innovative. They have a small population, so they do really interesting things with data and data visualization. So a country like that can really help another country that is maybe in a similar situation in terms of population or geography. So Botswana is completely on the other side of the world, but they're about the same latitude. They have about the same population. They share some economies like farming and cattle. So they can help each other much more than the UK can help either of them. So it's about kind of sharing knowledge around common challenges in a way that's not patronizing, because if all of the knowledge on data and technology is flowing from Silicon Valley to Africa, for example, then the solutions that come tend to be
ones that kind of assume a northern way of living or assume the privilege of people living in certain parts of the world. And that ends up just not being very useful. It's a bit like the problem of iPhones never had period tracking for years because men were developing all the apps and stuff. And so it's about acknowledging that context and local situations are much more important when you're looking at the application of data and technology trends. Thanks.
Great, thank you.